Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. We are continuing on with the trial of George Wagner IV. Before I get started, I want to give my sincerest condolences to the victim families and friends. And I also want to state that all the information is found on the internet and or social media. Also, I want to say that today is all about Kenneth Roden. So day 4 opens up with a motion from the defense saying that the crime happened in Scioto County instead of Pike County. In my opinion, you could tell that Judge Deering does not care where the defense says the crime happened, that it is a crime, and he wants the people to be prosecuted. He keeps telling them that they'll deal with the location later on. The defense continues on with the motion of the crime scenes being projected on the TV cameras. They're saying that it's insensitive and that they're not going to dispute that the crimes happened. The state is arguing that the pictures are important because it is important for the witnesses to testify that they saw the bodies in that fashion when they first got to the crime scene. The defense then argues that they can have the crime scene photos in a booklet, which each person can have their own personal booklet, and they can see the crime scenes that way. Judge Deering says it's important for all the juries to see the pictures at the same time, so he ruled against the motion. The defense then addresses how the witness's memory is being refreshed and saying that it doesn't coincide with how it's supposed to be done by law. The defense is arguing that the prosecution is not allowing the witnesses to thoroughly exhaust their memory. They're basically asking one question, and then if the person says, "I don't know," then they're giving them the particular document that they're testifying to at that point. They gave a couple examples like how Miranda Cable said she didn't know what time that her run report said, and how Bobby Joe testified exactly to what the documents were that she was shown. The defense wasn't asking anything of the judge, just that he should be aware of this type of refreshing so that when they do object, he would know what they were speaking about. So the first witness of the day was Daryl Hart. He chose not to be filmed or audioed. He was an EMS worker at the time, but he was with the Pike County EMS team. He was the EMS who had baby Kylie, and when Miranda asked if he needed any help, he said that he had it. He also is the same EMS worker that Tim Dickerson talked about coming to get the baby out of the room when they left back out the house. Now again, because he did not choose to be audioed or filmed, all of this is alleged. But he allegedly testified to the deputies clearing the house that Hannah's baby was a new baby and that it is routine to do a medical exam. He testified to baby Kylie being low on oxygen, but other than that, she was fine. He also testified to knowing Dana Roden from the medical community and that she was nice. Witness 2 of the day was Donald Stone, which is a cousin of Kenneth Roden and Christopher Roden Sr. He testifies to having gloves on because he has a skin condition, and he testifies to Kenneth's mother being his father's sister. Donald testifies to him and Kenneth being close and that every time that Donald needed Kenneth, he would be there to help him out. He testifies to going to auctions and buying cars with Kenneth and helping him fix them up. And that the last time he seen Kenneth was a few weeks before the crime at an auction where Kenneth bought a car, but he didn't buy a car at the time. He says he becomes aware of the crimes while he's at a HUD appointment, and somebody in the HUD office asks him if he knew what happened on Union Hill Road. He testifies to trying to call Kenneth and his son Luke Roden to see what was going on, but neither one of them answered. He testifies to going to the church where it's about 50 people there at the church. And he says while he's at the church, they begin to be concerned about Kenneth because, again, he's not answering the phone. He then states that Kenneth's son Luke and a guy named Sean Watson go to Kenneth's house. He testifies to parking behind Kenneth's truck, that the door was unlocked, and that he went inside and found Kenneth with blood all over his eyes in bed, deceased. Now, I do got to let y'all know, this is a very emotional testimony from this guy. You can tell that him and Kenneth were really close and he really cared about Kenneth. And when they pin out, they show Geneva, which is the matriarch of the family, crying, and some other family members that's in a courthouse crying as well. He testifies to Luke not seeing a body, but they left out of the house and they went to the building next door, which had marijuana in it. He also testifies that he had to drive about 1,500 feet away from Kenneth's house to get some reception because it was very poor reception in Kenneth's area. That's when he calls 911 and lets them know what he's found. They also played a 911 recording for the jury at this point. He also testifies to, once the police get there, that they put him in handcuffs and they put him in a cruiser to take him down to the sheriff's office, him and Luke, to be interviewed. He's then shown pictures of Kenneth's house, the building that has the marijuana in it, and he's shown pictures of Kenneth's body, and he is a complete wreck at this point. Canepa asks about money and keys and coins that's found in the pictures, and I think what she's trying to hint at that it wasn't a robbery, but that's just my opinion. Moving on. He testifies that once he's at Kenneth's house, he hasn't touched anything and that the Rodens were a close-knit family and that they were willing to help anybody. So on cross-examination, he was asked where he parked, where he said he parked about 100 feet from the actual door of the trailer. He was asked about Kenneth's operation, and he said he didn't know much about it. And on cross, he testified to Kenneth Roden helping anybody because he was considered well off. Witness number 3 is Luke Roden, who is Kenneth Roden's son, who also was there to discover Kenneth Roden's body on April 22nd. His testimony started with his mother and father being married for 16 or 17 years, and that they had a total of 4 kids, and that his younger brother died at the age of 7 from cancer. He testified to being really close to his father, and even though they lived 25 minutes away from each other, that they saw each other at least 3 or 4 times a week. He testified to Kenneth always keeping a job and that Kenneth and Chris Sr. were really close. He talks about being aware that his father grew marijuana and that he actually helped his father by trimming the marijuana for him. He testified to not really knowing the Wagners, but seeing Jake and talking to him about a tattoo, and in total seeing Jake about 3 times. He talks about seeing George Wagner IV about once, and seeing Billy Wagner 1 time as well, when his father and Chris Sr. went over to his house to help Billy Wagner with a machine that wouldn't start because it was cold outside. He also testifies to a time that Billy told him that his father and Chris were good people, but if he had to get in any altercation with them, he would have to shoot him. He then goes on to talk about his relationship with Frankie. He said they were closer when they were kids, but they did do derby car racing together and they fought chickens together. He also testified to never seeing Frankie and George Wagner IV together. He says on the day of the crimes that his mom woke him up and told him that it was an incident on Union Hill Road and that everybody had been shot up. He testified to trying to get to the crime scenes, but that police and medical emergency personnel had the roads blocked off. But while he was trying to get there, someone told him that the family was meeting at the church, so they went to the church. Luke testified to trying to reach out to Kenneth about a dozen times and that it was unusual because either Kenneth would answer the phone or he would reach back out to him. He testified that he wasn't really concerned because his dad did have high blood pressure and sometimes he would call off of work and just rest in order to get his blood pressure down. So they did decide to go to Kenneth's house, him, Donald, and Sean. He confirms Donald's testimony that Donald did go in and see the body, that he didn't actually see the body, he just saw his dad's legs, his forehead, and his hair, and Donald told him to leave the house. He testifies to Brent coming by on his 4-wheeler to see if they caught anything on camera, and then he also testifies that his sister showed up to his father's location, and that by the time the cops got there, within 10 minutes, they had him in the back of a police cruiser and they were taking him to the sheriff's station to be interviewed. He was shown pictures of the area and he was asked about cameras that his father had. Apparently, Kenneth had a sensor at the beginning of his driveway that when anybody would drive past, it would make an alarm. A few days before the crime, the sensor went out, so it wasn't performing properly. He was shown pictures of the crime scene. He was also shown pictures of his father's body, and he said he didn't touch anything except the door handle. He testified to the grow room and the shoes that he had on, and then he also testified at the end that his father was a heavy sleeper when he wasn't feeling good. Other than that, he was a really light sleeper. And he also testified to always defending Christopher Sr. When Chris got into a fight recently, Kenneth was the one that went and handled the situation for Chris. On cross, he was asked about the marijuana business, and he testified that his father, Kenneth, was getting ready to get out of the business and that he was going to hand over the operation to Gary Roden. He also was asked if people owed his father money, and he stated that he wasn't sure. Witness number 4 was Brent Hatfield, the friend that came by on the 4-wheeler when Chris and Donald and Sean were outside. He chose not to be audioed or filmed, so all of this is alleged, but he testified to knowing the Rodens his entire life. He also testified to working with Kenneth during his current job and that he was there at about 4 a.m. to pick up Kenneth because they would drive back and forth to work with each other. He says that the light didn't come on and that Kenneth didn't come outside, but because he knew Kenneth also had high blood pressure, he just thought it was one of those days. He goes on to testify that he does know about Kenneth and Chris's drug operation and that a big drug buy was supposed to happen out west that involved Christopher Sr. and Billy Wagner. So allegedly this deal was supposed to be for several $1,000s and it involved pounds of marijuana. He testified that after the murders, that Billy Wagner went around saying that a guy named Skid Montgomery was the one who committed the crimes. And the reason that he committed the crimes is because Christopher Sr. and himself, Billy Wagner, decided to cut Skid out of the drug operation. Brett also testified allegedly that Christopher Sr. would always have large cash on him and that he was also into cockfighting, and that one time he won $30,000 in a cockfighting match. On cross, Brett testified to seeing cocaine in Christopher Sr.'s safe, and that allegedly the cocaine was for Gary Roden because allegedly Gary Roden abused drugs. He also testified allegedly that Christopher Sr. had a business partner that was in Cincinnati, and the defense tried to make it seem like it was the business partner who committed these crimes. The last witness of the day was Deputy Bo Roman, and he also chose not to be filmed or audioed, so all of this is alleged. He said at the time of the crimes he was off duty, but he was called in for extra manpower. He testified that during the morning he was on routine patrol of the crime scenes on Union Hill Road, and in the afternoon he was called to go to Kenneth Roden's location. He also testified to being the first one there at Kenneth Roden's location as far as law enforcement with a guy named Bill Stansberry. So guys, tell me what you think about the trial down below. Do you think that the prosecution is doing a good job? Do you think they're dragging it along? Do you think that they're not keeping the jury interested? Like, what are your thoughts on this trial? Are you even following this trial? So in my personal opinion, I think the prosecution is trying to do their best to make sure that they cover all the bases that they think that the defense is going to use in order to say that George Wagner wasn't involved. I think that it's important to go over every single victim, but I think that by it being such a wide trial, that the way that they're going about it is not keeping the jury interested. This is just my opinion. And it's not incorporating George Wagner IV enough. Right now, we're just talking about the victims. And although that is important, we need to get to the meat and potatoes of this trial. I personally feel that with the information that's been given right now, that they don't have enough to charge George Wagner with anything. Now, they say this trial is supposed to last 5 or 6 weeks, and at the pace that they're going, I can certainly see that happening. Anyways, that was my rant. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. I'm out.